Thank you, Ben. Good evening, everybody. It's a story about a Hasidic Jewish guy in Brooklyn who is in the train, and his neighbor sees him reading an Arab newspaper. And he is amazed that he should read an Arab newspaper, you know Arabic. So he goes to him, he says, what is it, you know Arabic? He says, I learned Arabic. He says, why? He says, because if I read the American newspapers or the Yiddish newspapers, they all complain about Jews being killed and the Yiddish newspapers, Jews being attacked. I read the Arab newspaper, Jews dominate the world, Jews dominate the banking, the media, so why not enjoy instead of groaning and moaning? First, I'd like to, and by the way, Chodesh Tov, tonight the Kislev begins. My late father was the volunteer in collecting money for polio kids, affected polio kids in those days, and he used to do his bidding on Kislev to say, please open both your kiss and your lev. That is your pocket and your heart. So first of all, hearty thanks to the organizers of this fine conference. Of course, Mayor Linzen and Sharon and Avraham Ishai and Mala and Talia and also Ayelet, all the participants, really great organizational effort and successful. So you all, and what we've heard is a kaleidoscope of challenges, but also hopes. You know, in the Holocaust in Warsaw, a prominent rabbi by the name of Menachem Zemba was killed in the ghetto. He was in the 30s, he wrote about a midrash, a commentary which is sort of both Talmudic but also legendary, that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, a famous rebel against the Romans, said on that it is a halacha, like a law, that Esau, which is the epitome of Edom, the Romans, hates Jacob. Halachai beyadua, everybody knows that. So Rabbi Zemba asked, what is halacha here? Halacha, you have halacha for Shabbat, halacha for tefillin, halacha for mezuzah, halacha for Pesach. What kind of halacha is that there's a hatred there? And he says that his response is that it's my translation, that there is no real explanation and reason for anti-Semitism. It is very strange. He says some hate the Jews because they are capitalists, some because they are socialists, some because they are too smart, some because they are a burden, some because they are too religious, and some because they are too secular and progressive. All are contradictory reasons with no logic. And since Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, you know, the one from Miron, always looks for reasons behind biblical verses, he says, here, halacha, law, because the anti-Semitic hatred is like a law with no explanation and reason. What it means to say is that the chance to uproot anti-Semitism totally is very meager. I mentioned yesterday in 1987, as a cabinet secretary, I proposed to Prime Minister Shamir to establish a forum of monitoring anti-Semitic phenomena. And I quote, I wrote in a memo, those who believe that the victory on the Nazis also was a victory on anti-Semitism, and those who believe that in the last decade of the 20th century there is no renaissance for those dark emotions which are against all logic and all facts, was disappointed. My feeling, I wrote at the time, is that the matters will sadly go worse in the coming years. This is 1987. You know, they say that after the destruction of the temple, the power of prophecy was given to fools. So I probably go into that category because that is what I wrote 38 years ago. And by the way, in the forum of those years, we had Mala was here, and Dina Porat was our wider forum with the academia at the time. And so what happened is that if I read now the reporting which was made public, of which we did annually to the government, and I look at it now, it's the same problems, the same basic problems with nuances, including the Islamic fundamentalism, right-wing anti-Semitism, the legitimation of Zionism, you know, Zionism is racism and so on, and the denial of the Holocaust. And I at the time used to write that the shame that the Holocaust brought to, that made us hope that anti-Semitism will be in the gutter, was pushed aside by new waves. And at the time we spoke about the need to prepare to go into legal measures, educational measures, and of course diplomatic and so on measures. So, and every time when there's a conflict in the Palestinians, there's a wave of anti-Semitism and anti-Israeli. This time is much, much bigger, and the technology which we heard about so much this evening is, of course, very helpful, because what once would be somehow in certain circles is now in 1 second throughout the world, and of course you have the networks and the AI. I thought AI was artificial intelligence. I think it's sometimes anti-Israel AI, but in the Hasidic liturgic music has I, so this also could count. In any case, and we mentioned yesterday that there's an analytical question: can you be critical of Israel without being anti-Semitic? Yes, you can be critical of Israel. Many in Israel are critical of our government, for instance. Many in this room too. But you can right away see what is behind the accusations and so on. And you know, Nathan Sharansky used to speak of the 3 Ds: demonization, dehumanization, delegitimation. They are also valid. And we heard, I don't want to take the time to repeat what we heard by all the very interesting panels which we've heard. And I will also not dwell upon the American ambassador, which was really, but by and large, with respect to the U.S. and respect to their help and to President Trump, with everything, you always have to salute it. But what we saw is a picture of darkness, but also lights. One of the lights is here in this hall, the fact that there are Jews from many countries here. And I was happy to meet people that I knew and people that I met first time, Joe Sisko used to be the Undersecretary of State under Kissinger, used to tell the story about this guy who was the only survivor of a flood in Pennsylvania in 1889, and for 60 years made a living on lecturing on how I survived that flood. Finally, he came to the Almighty, and the angel in charge said to him, "We have the club of the newcomers. Please introduce yourself." He said, "Fine." He said, "What will be your topic?" He said, "How I survived the Johnstown, Pennsylvania flood in 1889. The angel says, "Such a narrow topic. Pick something better, something more universal." He said, "That's all I know. I made a living on that." He said, "If you want to do, go ahead. But you know that Noah is going to be in the audience." And there are many people here that qualify for the Noah. But the fact that you are all here and you go into the Jewish, very ancient tradition in the book of Esther, Leikahel ve'la'amod al nafsham, that is, that you gather together to work for your defense, that is all so valid. So we should remember that too. The main message that, one word about memory also. Our genetic code as Jews is memory. And this goes against denial of the Holocaust. It goes against, and it is those who are dead in the Holocaust, those who are dead around Gaza, in the kibbutzim and the moshavim in that area, their blood is calling us to work. It's not enough to remember. It's the obligation. I spoke, I'm like a dinosaur, so I spoke in Babi Yar 24 years ago, and I spoke about the need to make sure that such tragedies like Babi Yar, Mala was with me, wouldn't come up. And I said, nobody should think that this is something that couldn't happen again. It didn't happen again, thank God, in the sense of the Holocaust. But what you saw in Gaza, maiming, killing, including my own relative, 88 years old, in the kibbutz Nachal Oz, in the kibbutz Be'eri, and Israel is, with all its shortcomings, is still the most important guarantee for the Jewish people. Still, it is the most important guarantee for the Jews, and will be so. And again, apprehension of politicization. And we see what we see, and I also remember pleading to get out of the act. Nobody, by the way, when we left the International Court of Justice Yani, as if when we left it, at the time, nobody even thought that we should also leave the genocide treaty. The genocide treaty, a Jewish lawyer, Lemkin, pushed for it, and now this is a tool against us. So the main message that we ought to, and I'm close to finishing, is, and that is what everybody here should take with them home, is not to despair, despite the fact that the chance for what is now popular in Israel used to be nitzachon muchlat, the ultimate victory on anti-Semitism, is not too great. But we shouldn't tire, we shouldn't despair, and we speak of establishments, of organizations like ours, and the need to have coalitions with those who are not Jewish, who understand what anti-Semitism is, what it did, what it could do, and coalition with And we heard about, today we heard about Poland, what's going on here. So some countries will understand our problems. And the same headlines are education, diplomacy, public policy, and the law. And the law is the essence of this particular organization, the IGA. And we ought to, I don't know how many of you remember the name Niemöller. Niemöller was a German pastor who, after the war, wrote this short poem. First they came for the communists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I didn't speak out because I wasn't a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. Remember the name Niemöller. Finally, we in Israel ought to be better. All the time ought to be better. Human rights, strengthening and not weakening the strategic asset known as the Supreme Court and as the Attorney General, with all our shortcomings, pushing for a constitutional change, what we call, in my view, a slim constitution, pushing for peace for the soldier who is in Gaza, that he should know that he doesn't come tomorrow morning, but somebody in Jerusalem is sitting and thinking also about that. To learn always from our mistakes. Humility. And remember that Zionism is a must, and Israel is a miracle and a historic deposit by providence, by Jewish history, to keep. So when we live here, we should have in mind both the continued struggle against anti-Semitism, in this case by law, but in other ways too, the need for the partnership with Jews everywhere, the need for partnership with non-Jews who give a hand, and Israel's behavior as a fair, democratic, Jewish state. Am Yisrael Chai. Thank you very much.